Hi YouTube, my name is Jack, and today we're going to try this again. I tried uploading this video yesterday, my computer cut all the audio, so we're going to try to re-record today and see how it goes. And I don't really remember what I said yesterday because I never have a script for these videos, I just sit down in front of a camera and talk. But the thrust of it was that I've had a lot of people outside of the Gardnerian community ask me why I'm still Gardnerian. And the reason that they ask me that sort of depends on the person who's talking to me. So one thing that I get quite commonly is, you've moved out to Utah, you're the only Gardnerian in the state, there isn't a coven anywhere near you. If you want to be in a Gardnerian coven, you have to bootstrap one on your own as a solitary priest, which is exhausting and terrifying for all sorts of reasons. Why bother? Why try to get a Gardnerian coven started here? And why not just kind of walk away from the Gardnerian stuff and see what exists in the pagan community here, and then integrate into that? So if there's, another witchcraft tradition here, or if there are a surprising number of like Norse heathens here, if that's what's here, why not just do that? That's a question that I get sometimes. A parallel question is, why not just be solitary? Like, if I'm here and there's no coven around, why not just do things on my own and do ritual the way I like, and not worry about putting all of the work in to try to get a coven started? There are other people who will say, I think, less well-intentioned things. So every now and then you get someone who's like, oh, the Gardnerian tradition is irrelevant, Gardnerian Wicca is dying, there's no good reason that anyone should be Gardnerian anymore. Or sort of a weird offshoot of that is, there are sometimes people who will say like, oh, well, you get the Gardnerian initiation, so that makes you legitimate, but then you go off and do the real stuff. Which, boy, I don't even know where to begin with addressing any of that. Like, Gardnerian initiation doesn't confer any legitimacy outside of the Gardnerian tradition. If you don't want to be practicing the Gardnerian tradition, there's no reason to seek out Gardnerian initiation, because it doesn't make you any better at whatever other thing you decide to do. But anyways, so like, I get these kinds of comments. Why are you still doing this? Why is this the thing that you have decided to stake your flag on? And the truth is, I don't have a great answer to that. I think if you just looked at me and looked at, like, who I am as a person, I think there are some things that might seem like they made more sense, just from an outsider's perspective, right? A lot of like the wizard shit, the Solomonic grimoire magic, or hermetism, or things like that. On paper, those might make more sense for me. I am a gay man. Gardnerian Wicca famously has a history of not being super LGBT inclusive. There are people who are like, well, why wouldn't you prefer to be in, like, if you want to be in witchcraft, why wouldn't you prefer to be in a queer tradition of witchcraft like the Minoan Brotherhood, or like fairy witchcraft, which has been queer and queer inclusive from the outset, right? Why belong to a tradition of witchcraft that, at least in its origin, is rooted in heteronormativity, and that has a history of lots of people in that tradition being shitty to queer people? Why would you want to do that? I don't have great answers. I will give you the answers that I have, and these are satisfying to me, but may not be satisfying to other people. The big answer is that Gardnerian ritual does something for me that I have not found anywhere else. Gardnerian ritual just, like, it fills my cup, and I walk out of a Gardnerian circle and I feel like I have been reborn, I feel refreshed, I feel renewed, I feel complete. And I've been to wonderful non-Wiccan rituals. When I say non-Wiccan, non-initiatory Wiccan rituals, so rituals that were not Gardnerian or Alexandrian. I've been to wonderful non-Wiccan rituals that were effective and well run. Hi, sweetie. And absolutely did the thing that they were trying to do. And those rituals were great. They didn't do the thing for me that Gardnerian ritual does. Gard is the only thing that has ever done that for me. And ultimately, that's the reason I keep coming back, is because every time I am in a Gardnerian circle, there's just this feeling of, oh, this is what it's supposed to be. I don't like what it's supposed to be, because I like other rituals, like other styles of ritual, other traditions, whatever, are not doing things wrong. They're not illegitimate. It's just that they're doing different things. And the thing that Gardnerian Wicca is doing is the one that fills me up. That's really what it comes down to, is just the ritual, right? There are a lot of people in the Gardnerian community who I think are lousy. I don't interact with them or talk to them much. There are a lot of people in the Gardnerian community who I also think are great, but like you'll hear people say like, oh, I came to Gardnerian Wicca for the people. I connected with it for the community, for the tradition. That has never been me. I like my coven, or my initiatory coven. I don't belong to it anymore, but I liked the people in my coven. There were people in the wider Gardnerian community who I really love, still love, and connect to and respect magically, but I'm not in it for the bigger community. That's never been what I'm in it for. I'm in it because when I am in a Gardnerian ritual, it feels right to me, and it makes me feel whole. And that's not to say that community is not a part of it, right? Community is a part of it. But to me, and I've talked about this before, the community is at the coven level. The community that I care about is the coven, the group of people that I am circling with on a regular basis. And then the wider Gardnerian community to me is just not nearly as important. And there are people in that community whom I met because they were Gardnerian and were very good friends, and I love them, and I'm grateful to have met them in that way. But the concept of the Gardnerian community doesn't matter as much to me, isn't a big part of why I'm still doing this. Now that said, the coven is important. The coven is important, A, just for the sake of having community. I think it's really important to have people around that you can be yourself with, and that you can be yourself specifically magically with. I think it's important to have a community of close-knit people whom you really trust and whom you are able to work magic with because you have built that bond of trust with each other. I also think it's important to have at least a few people around who have enough of a shared framework that you can talk about your witchcraft without having to explain every little thing, right? One of the challenges of being solitary is if you're doing your own thing and creating it all from scratch, that's wonderful. But if you ever want to talk about that with someone else, you have to explain everything from the ground up. And if you belong to a coven with people, you have a little bit more common ground when you're starting off, so that you don't have to re-explain everything every time you open your mouth. But more than that, there is a sense of solidarity, belonging, and connection that is a really important thing to me. You'll sometimes hear Gardnerians say something like, oh, you can't be a Gardnerian alone. And part of that is just because you can't be a Gardnerian without having been initiated by another Gardnerian. So like you can't just be Gardnerian without ever having been in contact with another Gardnerian, because that's how the tradition is passed, right? It is a tradition that is passed from initiator to initiate. So part of that is just that. Part of it is logistically that Gardnerian ritual is designed to be practiced in a group. Groups typically max out at about a dozen people, right? Gardnerian ritual is designed to be done like in your living room, so it's logistically, it's designed for smaller groups. But you want a group, right? Doing Gardnerian ritual just on my own, I have to make adaptations. I have to make allowances. I have to change things for the sake of having only one person in circle. and it doesn't work as well, right? It's still good, it's still effective, I still get something out of that ritual. But whenever I, have someone visiting and we do ritual with two of us, or if I go, back east and I'm visiting people and I'm doing ritual like with an actual group, there's a world of difference, because Gardnerian ritual really is designed logistically and magically to be done by a group, and it makes a difference. But then also, I think there's a really important idea in Gardnerian Wicca that having a coven keeps you in check. Gardner has an anecdote, and I think it's in the meaning of witchcraft, but I would have to look to make sure. But Gardner has an anecdote about a coven, probably the New Forest coven, because who else was he with? Oh, I mean, by this point, the Bricket Wood coven had started. But he has an anecdote about a witch who was in a coven that he belonged to, who was really angry about something, had really been incensed, had felt that she had been deeply wronged, and wanted to fuck shit up. And Gardner has this anecdote where he says, basically, the coven kept her in check. The coven kept her from doing anything rash or anything that she would regret later, and if the coven hadn't been there, she would probably have tried to kill him. That matters. It matters to have people around you who can keep you in check and keep you grounded. Now that's all discussion sort of in favor of practicing with a group, practicing with a coven, and why I want to do that. Why the Gardnerian tradition specifically, and not just finding a coven that does something different here, is sort of a separate question. And really, again, it comes back to the guard stuff just hits me in a way that nothing else does. And I wish I had a more satisfying answer. I wish for my own sake as well as for other people's. Because I look at, the Solomonic shit and I'm like, yeah, this seems like the kind of shit that would be really good for me. This seems like the kind of stuff that I would really love. And, I love electional astrology. It's like a puzzle to me. I love playing with the pieces and seeing how they move around and trying to get them to fit together. I love the systematicity that you get in Solomonic magic, or in various related forms of magic, Golden Dawn style, Hermetic Kabbalah, whatever it is, right? Like, I wrote a book about Kabbalah. It has a special place in my heart. But ultimately, my magical practice has really moved away from that as I've gone deeper and deeper into the Gardnerian stuff, because I love the simplicity of Gardnerian ritual and of the theology that underlies it. There are lots of covens that do more elaborate versions of Gardnerian ritual, and that consequently have a more elaborate version of the theology connected to it. Florida in particular, if you spend time with Gardnerian covens in Florida, their ritual tends to be much more elaborate than the kind of ritual that I'm familiar with, and just as a matter of personal taste, than the kind of ritual that I like, right? I like really stripped down ritual. I like bare bones. I think that the simpler ritual is, at least in a Gardnerian context, the more room it has to breathe and the more power we can build into it. That's just my own personal taste. That is not universal, anything. Like, different people have different tastes, and there are lots of people who have smells and bells and bells and whistles that they really like, that they have used to embellish their ritual to make it more robust. But for me, part of why I'm still in Gardnerian Wicca is because of the simplicity of it, is because there's just this gentle, simple elegance to the ritual. There is power in the ritual, but it's simple. It's straightforward. The theology of Gardnerian Wicca has been built up over time with all kinds of other stuff, including, if you watched my last video, ideas that are present in some covens and not in others. I was certainly taught that those ideas were like built into the Gardnerian tradition, and as time goes on, increasingly you realize that a lot of the things that were done in your parent coven were more idiosyncratic than you realized. That's just part of learning to navigate the wider Gardnerian tradition. But including ideas about like gendered ways of moving magical power. Those ideas, as you may have seen in my last video, basically come straight from Dion Fortune. So there are a lot of things where like people have built in other ideas, people have borrowed from elsewhere in occult tradition over the course of the, 90 years that the Gardnerian tradition has been around. People have borrowed from Golden Dawn stuff, people have borrowed from Dion Fortune, people have borrowed from Aleister Crowley, from whatever. Like, there are also people who are borrowing from Hinduism or like whatever. Different covens are people find the things that they like and incorporate them in. But I think that the tradition itself, the skeleton of the tradition, is very simple, is very elegant, and doesn't need a lot of bells and whistles, and I find that really appealing. I find it appealing that it doesn't need to have the Golden Dawn stuff in it. It doesn't need to have the Dion Fortune, or the Hinduism and the chakras, or like whatever other things anyone has decided to bring into their coven. Gardnerian ritual doesn't need all that extra stuff. It's just this simple, clean thing that can kind of live on its own 2 feet. And I love that. And I love the simplicity of the theology as well. This is something that, like, there was a polemic in the 70s and the 80s where people sort of had this idea of a natural Wiccan theology, where if you didn't have any preconceptions about religion and you just looked out into the world, you would arrive at the theology of Wicca. And you would see that, sexual dimorphism is common in nature. You would see that the seasons move in cycles and the moon moves in phases. And you would come to the conclusion that there is a goddess and a god, and that they are sort of in this eternal cycle of death and rebirth. I don't think that's true. I think that Wicca comes out of a very particular historical moment. And it is not the case that, like, anyone with eyes to see would end up at Wicca. I don't think that's true. But I do think that there is a simplicity to Wiccan theology that works really well. And I think that Wicca is in many ways a sincere attempt to construct witchcraft from first principles, to start from nothing and then build a witchcraft from the ground up. So I think just the simplicity of it appeals to me on a theological level, and then the power of the ritual itself just does something for me that is very difficult for me to put into words, as you can see, because I'm having a hard time putting it into words. But being in the ritual itself is the reason that I am still a Gardnerian. So that's about all that I have. I'm going to wrap this up here. Hopefully the audio worked this time around. For those in the US, hi sweetie. For those in the US, I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving, and I'm sure I'll be back at some point soon. Bye.